everyone, and welcome to another reading blog. Today I'm going to talk about the 5 books I've read in March. March was not a very good reading month for me. I read a lot of books that I didn't truly enjoy, but I did read one great one that I will also talk to you and recommend for you guys. So let's get started. By the way, this is Evie, one of my 3 fur babies, and unfortunately she will not be assisting me today because she's not really liking this. The first book I read in March was Good Is Gone by Amy Gentry. This book had awesome reviews on Goodreads, so I decided to give it a try. 8 years ago, 13-year-old Julie Whitaker was kidnapped from her bedroom in the middle of the night. In the years since, her family have papered over the cracks of their grief while hoping against hope that Julie is still alive. And then, one night, the doorbell rings. A young woman calling herself Julie claims to have come home. But certain things don't add up. Julie's story doesn't quite ring true. And before long, the family are in danger of being torn apart all over again. It sounds pretty good, but it wasn't. I hated this book, which surprisingly, because of all the awesome reviews I read on Goodreads. So now I'm really confused. I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to believe. I think what I hated the most about this book was how confused I was the whole time reading it. Every other chapter is either about what the parents are going through, having their daughter back, being confused, being scared, and what the daughter went through for 8 years. But every chapter introduces new characters and you don't know what's going on. Evidently, the girl is lying to her parents about what she went through. It's just so confusing. The writing was good, it was elegant, that was a plus, but it was dull. It was not exciting reading this. The ending, in my opinion, was also predictable. It was just a dull read. And I finished it in one day because I just wanted to get away from this book. The next 3 books I read are a fantasy fiction series called The Queen of the Tearling Trilogy by Erika Johansen. I am actually having a really tough time deciding whether or not I like this series. I can totally understand why a lot of people gave it good reviews on Goodreads, and I can totally understand why people like me did not like it. So I'm gonna try to keep a fair judgment, and I'm going to try to give you a fair critique so that you can decide for yourself whether or not this is a series that you would like. The first book in the series is Queen of the Tearling, and it follows this 19-year-old girl named Kelsey, a princess, who doesn't remember her mother. She was placed in a cottage for her own protection, far, far away from the kingdom. She only has 2 caretakers. She doesn't have any contact with anyone else but her 2 caretakers. And she's learning how to be a queen, she's learning all the essential things to be a good ruler. On her 19th birthday, the queen has long been dead, and these guards come to take her back to the kingdom and to crown her. So the first book is mainly about Kelsey leaving the cottage, the only place she's ever known, to go back to a kingdom that she doesn't remember because she was taken away when she was a baby. It's a lot of descriptions, it's a lot of traveling, not much happens until the very end of the book. Now, because Kelsey doesn't remember her mother, and for some reason, which you don't learn about till well into the books, no one would tell her anything about her kingdom, no one would tell her about her mother, her father. She has no idea who her father is. She finally gets to the castle and realizes that the woman that she idealized, her mother, was actually a really poor queen who made really bad decisions for the kingdom, basically screwed everybody up. The entirety of the 3 books is mainly Kelsey trying to not be like her mother, but everything she does is overshadowed by her mother and the type of queen that she was. Now, I can't go into any further details without spoiling anything, so I'll just talk about what I personally did not like about the book. It felt so long to me. It honestly felt like this trilogy could have been in duology, but because the author wanted to make it 3 books, everything is overdrawn and super detailed. And because Kelsey has never left the cottage, everything is new to her. So everything is described, as the color of the grass, to the smell of the air, to, I don't know. But the amount of descriptions that are placed in these books, and it pertains to everything Kelsey feels, tastes, smells, experiences, but there are no descriptions or background stories of her guards, who are really the only characters that are likable in the story. You get a brief description of them, and then that's it. But I wanted to learn more about them because ultimately these are the only people that she trusts, but you don't know their background stories, you know nothing about them, and that really irked me. On the back of the book itself, it says, "Did you love the Hunger Games? Partial to an episode of Game of Thrones? Then you're going to want to dive straight into this heat." I feel like this is false advertising because I don't see any sort of relevance to the Hunger Games. The second book, The Invasion of the Tearling, is a lot better than the first one. We finally get much more magic, which we didn't get much of in the first one. And the writing is very good. It's not the writing I have issues with, it's the amount of descriptions. And in this book, we finally get some very powerful quotes, as this one. "Always we think we know what courage means. If I were called upon, we say, I would answer the call. I would not hesitate. Until the moment is upon us, and then we realize that the demands of true courage are very different from what we had envisioned long ago on that bright morning when we felt brave." That's pretty powerful. In the first book, I thought the plot was completely uninteresting. I thought it was overdone, already seen, read a million times, and I was really displeased to realize that it was that sort of book. But in the second book, you realize that the plot thickens and it's actually really not what you thought it was. And something new, we get flashbacks. So different characters' point of views that kind of sort of start explaining how the Tearling world got to be what it is. But I have to admit that halfway through the second book, I lost interest because the plot, there are no twists and turns. The plot follows a really simple path. And I just really started hating it because, again, so many descriptions about things that aren't needed. One of the reasons I also did not enjoy this series as much as I could have was that I did not like the main character. Queen Kelsey is a 19-year-old brat. She's reckless, she makes poor decisions, she's got an anger issue, and I just did not connect with her. I didn't want to, and perhaps I need to remind myself that I am reading young adult, and most of these characters are 19-year-olds, and I remember how I was when I was 19. But it's like there's a constant struggle between her wanting people to consider her an adult and then making stupid teenager decisions that reflect poorly on her entire kingdom. With all that being said, the third book is considerably better than the first two. The plot moves along faster, you get answers, there's actual excitement in the pages. The descriptions are still there. I still find myself skimming over the paragraphs to just get to the point, but the ending is what makes this series good. I was gonna say so good, but I can't actually say that. The ending was actually thought out. I didn't see it coming, and I really wish that the entirety of the three books were as thought out, as well written, as exciting as the ending of this one. These books touch some very serious topics in our culture, such as pedophilia, self-harm, self-loathing, rape, social status, and it had the potential to really be great. However, I truly did not like how the author handled the solutions to these problems. I don't want to spoil anything, but for example, one character is repeatedly abused and raped by her husband, and the only solution that comes out of it is more violence. I just don't like the message that came out of these topics, if that makes sense. So let's wrap this up. Overall, I give it a 2 out of 5 on Goodreads because, again, I'm not one to like overdrawn, over-detailed descriptions of everything. I like to have some things to imagine myself, and even though the last book was great in my opinion, it still couldn't make the other two better in my eyes. Also, there were so many ideas thrown in these books. I felt like it was Game of Thrones meets The 100 meets Lost meets Noah's Ark and meets the butterfly effect. It was just too much thrown into it, and I was just sitting here like, WTF. But again, I can totally understand why so many people like this series. It was a good story. It just wasn't for me. So I hope if you're considering reading this series, I didn't completely convince you to not read it because it was good, and perhaps if you're not so bothered by detailed descriptions and less dialogue, then this is for you. So I don't want to tell you whether to read it or not. I think you should make your own decision on that one. I am sorry if that was a lot of rambling. I feel like my ideas weren't very organized on this one. So let's just move on to the next. So after finishing a series that I didn't truly like all the way, I didn't know whether I was gonna choose another young adult series that I've already bought, or go with a different style of literature that I'm not used to just to refresh my brain. And so I decided to put the young adult series for next month, and instead I picked this book, The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. Gotta applaud because this was so refreshing on a writing literature level. I give it a 5 stars. I knew I was going to love this book after reading the first few pages. The story follows a main character named Daniel. Daniel is 10 years old in the beginning of the book, and his father brings him to a place called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. It's a place where all forgotten books are placed, whether it's illegal reading material at the time or just books that people don't read anymore, and they're placed there for safekeeping. So Daniel goes there and he's only allowed to pick one book that he can take home. So Daniel wanders around this maze of literature and finds one book by Julian Carax, and he takes it home and devours the book. And so the story evolves into Daniel trying to figure out what happened to the author and why there are no more books of his out to be read. He also comes across a character who goes around burning all of Julian Carax's books. And so the story goes along for years into Daniel's life, trying to solve this mystery as to why there are no books, why this person's trying to burn the remaining books, and what happened to the author. So this is essentially a mystery, but it's also so much more than that. It's a thriller, historical fiction, existential mystery, and a passionate love story. You know, when you love a book so much and you finish reading it and then you just hold it to your heart? Well, that's what I did with this one. It's a really great, sad story revolving about literature, which is awesome, but it's also filled with love and so much hope. It was great. And there are so many points that I actually loved about the plot, about the writing, so let's get into it. First of all, I was really pleased with the story taking place in Spain. The author is from Barcelona, and that's where the entire story takes place. The story progresses through the Spanish Civil War. I knew absolutely nothing about the Spanish Civil War, and although it's historical fiction, I did learn a little bit about how the people were living before and after what they went through, so that was really neat. The only part that kind of bothered me, and it really was not a big deal, is that in the 40s, women were still considered objects that could be beaten, that were just to be married off and to just have children. Luckily, the author spent little time on that topic, very little descriptions, so the feminist in me was very happy about that. Second of all, the writing is phenomenal, and that's what made this book so enjoyable to me. The plot doesn't move at a very fast pace, but because the author is able to captivate your attention through his elegant and intelligent writing, it really is not bothersome. There is a great balance of powerful descriptions and quirky, witty dialogue, which I'm a very big fan of. My only wish is that my Spanish would have been strong enough to read this book in its original version. You would think that after taking Spanish all through high school, all through college, I'd be able to read it, and that is my greatest shame right now, that I can't read this in its original version, which must have been so much more powerful than the translated version, although the translator did a wonderful job. The plot itself was nothing like I've read before and nothing like I expected it to be. It was mysterious, sad, compelling, engaging. It was so much more than a simple mystery. And at one point, the character Daniel describes his story, his own story, to another character, and it really kind of summarizes the book in whole. So that's how it goes. A story about cursed books, about the man who wrote them, about a character who broke out of the pages of a novel so that he could burn it, about a betrayal and a lost friendship. It's a story of love, of hatred, and of the dreams that live in the shadow of the wind. The only thing I would change about this book is how the mystery is solved and explained to you, but I promise you it did not affect my feelings on the story whatsoever. And like I said in the beginning, reading this book was refreshing on a literature and writing level, and I am fully heartedly recommending that you read it as well. So that is it for the month of March. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you guys next month for my next book vlog. Bye!